Hi, it's Senator Malcolm Roberts. It's Friday afternoon, and this is the weekly wrap-up. So I want to go straight to a key point that's just been raised, and we've had quite a bit of telephone calls and emails and inquiries about this. I want to make it very, very clear. It is not true that the High Court has struck down the referendum. It is not true. Some people are saying, because they've seen this on social media, that they don't need to vote anymore. No, that's what some people want you to do, not vote. The point is vote. Vote in this referendum and vote no. Some information has been sent to the High Court, and the High Court has not made a decision. It has not made a decision. It's not a victory at all. It's not even a decision. There's not even been consideration by the High Court. The High Court has not even considered the matter. In fact, the High Court has not even accepted it into the court. The filing was not made. So an application was made to the High Court, but the filing has not been made. The High Court, I've seen the response, the High Court has not accepted it, not even filed it. So it's not in the court at all. So I want to make it very clear. I've had a barrister check this, and he's sat beside me, and we've gone through it. I'm not a lawyer, but he is, and it's quite clear that it is not true that the High Court has struck down the referendum. Keep going and vote no. Now, I'm a very big supporter of Dr. William Bay regarding his APRA activities. He's been marvellous. He's got a ton of energy. He's an excellent speaker, and he's highly intelligent. But it is not true that the High Court has struck down the referendum. So keep going. The referendum is underway, and we will vote on the 14th of October. Now let's get to something else this week. I spoke on let me see what the name of that bill was. The financial accountability regime, as I pointed out in the Senate. It's a financial accountability regime bill that has no accountability. There's not one fine, not one jail sentence been imposed, to our knowledge, on any bank or any bank executive, who's come as a result of the Hayne Royal Commission into Financial Services. Not one. So heinous crimes, and not one person has been punished. Now, the Liberals introduced this bill, and when they did, they removed the provisions for fining executives. Remove them. Labor's introduced this bill. There are no provisions for fining executives. So you can steal from the bank and be thrown in the slammer for decades. If the bank steals from you, no one pays. No one. That's the way it is in this country. And I'll give you some examples. This might stun you. Let's go through the shareholders of the National Australia Bank. And try and remember these. It's difficult, but the Vanguard Group has 3.3%. BlackRock Fund Advisors, Vanguard Investments Australia Limited, Norges Bank Investment Management, State Street Global Advisors, Colonial First State Investments, Goody Capital Management, BlackRock Advisors, Net Wealth Investments, and the Caisse de Dépôt at Placement du Québec. I did French in the first couple of years at high school. I was terrible at it. Vanguard Group, BlackRock Fund, Vanguard Investments, BlackRock Advisors, Colonial First State, and State Street. Sound familiar? The big global funds that control so many countries, so many governments. So let's move on from the National Australia Bank to the Commonwealth Bank of Australia. And I read these out, by the way, in the Senate. The Finance Minister, Senator Gallagher, didn't seem too comfortable when I was reading them. So the shareholders in the Commonwealth Bank include the Vanguard Group, BlackRock Fund Advisors, Vanguard Investments Australia, Norges Bank, Goody Capital Management, Australian Foundation Investment, BlackRock Advisors, Net Wealth Investments, FIL Investment Management, one that's not with the NAB, Vanguard Global Advisors. So again, Vanguard Group, BlackRock Fund, Vanguard Investments, Vanguard Global, BlackRock Advisors. So let's move on to the Westpac Bank. And these combined form a controlling interest in the banks. Okay, here we go with Westpac. The Vanguard Group, 3.326%. Vanguard Group has 3.3 or more in each of these banks. Vanguard Investments, BlackRock Fund Advisors, Norges Bank Investment Management, State Street Global Advisors, Goody Capital, Advanced Asset Management, BlackRock Advisors, Australian Foundation Investment, Net Wealth Investments. Sound familiar? That's very almost identical to the previous two banks. Let's go to the fourth and last of the big four banks, ANZ Group Holdings. First one, Vanguard Group, 3.328%. BlackRock Fund Advisors, Vanguard Investments, State Street Global, Goody Capital Management, BlackRock Advisors, Net Wealth Investments, Dimensional Fund Advisors, Vanguard Global Advisors, BlackRock Investment. These major global funds, the predatory global funds, the main ones around the world, control a big chunk of our big four banks. So what happens is they appoint directors, and the directors appoint executives, and the executives do what they're told. Otherwise, they don't keep their job. So the executives have to be protected. That's the way I see it. So that what happens is the government leaves them out of any fines. So what we've got in this country is major banks owned in large part by the major globalist predators. And when they make profits, they ship the profits to the funds. When they make losses, they come with a cap in their hand and say, can you bail us out to the government? Or they say, can you bail us in and we'll take the money off the depositors. So that's what's going on in this country. We also had to look at some other large companies. Look at Coles, similar people, similar investment houses own parts of Coles. Qantas, same. So we move from the banks, who are a law unto themselves and who quite often influence the laws that are made in this country. And we move on to Qatar Airlines, was denied routes in this country. So Qantas is making high profits after pocketing $900 million, I think, from JobKeeper under the federal government during COVID mismanagement, and Qatar Airlines, which would have been a competitor and driving prices down for consumers in this country. Instead, Qantas has it largely to itself with a little bit of competition from Virgin. Government regulation in the banking sector and in many sectors is there to protect the major players. Governments do not protect the citizens in this country. Governments screw the citizens in this country. Speaking of screwing the citizens, this past week and September the 14th coming up is the 4th anniversary of COVID. September the 14th, from memory from my speech, is the date when Italy recognised it. But look at the mess we've been through there. And who owns big chunks of Pfizer? BlackRock, Vanguard. Do I need to name them? You can see what I'm getting at. The Albanese government is starting to lose its shine. It's taken a year, but the extreme arrogance, the lies, because they claim to be consultative, they claim to be transparent, it's complete rubbish. They are deliberately deceptive. They have been so with The Voice and continue to be so with The Voice. And I want to thank the many people, especially Senator Pauline Hanson and Senator Nampa Jimpa Price, who've exposed the nonsense with The Voice. We've done our bit as well. We'll be doing more in the coming weeks. But so many people have been encouragingly saying to us they're voting no, because that is the only way to vote on this. We'll have another session on live stream with this voice. So that's the wrap up for this week. Now I'll turn it over to questions. I think I just heard one of my staff lining up the questions quickly. See, they thought I'd go on longer, but I told him I'd be short this week because I was so long last week. Thank you, Mr. Steve. It's always BlackRock, Vanguard and State Street. They pretty much own everything between them. Yes, and also First Street, I think, is the other one, Mr. Steve. Where is it? Colonial First, sorry. Yeah. Yes, you're right, Mr. Steve. BlackRock, Vanguard and State Street. They're the people and their owners, they're large owners that I refer to when I talk about the global predators. They're also parasitic predators. So if you look at wind turbines and solar panels, they're going in at huge subsidies. Guess who's making the money? Sure, some well-known billionaires are making money out of it. A lot of money from the subsidies that you and I are paying. But BlackRock, Vanguard and State Street will be standing to gain heaps in the background. And I go back to a few years ago, and Dr. Megan Clark was the head of the CSIRO at a time when she was spreading misinformation about climate and climate fear through the CSIRO. And she happened to be a director. Now, see if I can remember these accurately. A director on Rothschild's Bank Australia, on its advisory board, and Bank of America Merrill Lynch, I think something like that. She was a director at the same time on those banks, those major global international banks, at the same time as she was chief executive of the CSIRO. BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. They pretty much own everything between them, Mr. Steve. You are dead correct. Rob Madafari, you missed the High Court challenge. Can you recap? Sure, I'll say it again. I made notes so that I'd be accurate. It is not true, Rob, that the High Court has struck down the referendum. It is not true. Some people are saying there's no need to vote now because it's been struck down. That is not correct. We must vote. Keep going, just vote. And vote no. Some information and an application was sent to the High Court. The High Court has not accepted it into the court. The filing has not even been made. It is not filed, so it's not in the court. The High Court has not given it any consideration at all. It is not a victory. It is not a decision. Dorothy, thank you. I was needing clarification on this. On what? State Street, BlackRock and Vanguard, or on the High Court? Anyway, we'll do it again. I'll do it again if I have to. Liz, feel free to copy my profile pic, everyone. I like that profile pic. I think we actually have, or we've done a broader view of that on one of my posts on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, I think, Liz. So if you're the one who started it, thank you very much. It's very, very good. I try to attribute the actual creator. Sometimes I just attribute the person who shares it with me because I don't know the creator. But there you go, everyone. Please share. Someone with a Greek alphabet name says, hello, everyone. Greetings from Greece. Hi. Looks like I hope that's not your motel. Dixon Bainbridge. Vote no. My council, Shoalhaven City Council in New South Wales, is using ratepayer-funded money to fly yes flags. Yet we offered to donate no flags and they will not allow us to fly them. Extreme corruption. I agree. It's wrong. Totally wrong. And if you look around, the people who are sponsoring the Yes campaign receive money from the government. That's what this is about. It's about money. The churches, aged care, healthcare, hospitals, and schools. They used to be independent and have a pretty good system. Now they've become dependent for some of their costs on the government. So they're now at the whim of the government. Same with Qantas, painting its planes in yes. As someone said, one of the things that the new CEO could start with is stop welcome to country on the flights and repaint their planes back into Qantas normal livery colour. Councils receive grants from the federal government. Newspapers receive funds from the federal government. People receiving money from the government are dependent on the government. That's why we must get back to small government in this country and let the voters and the consumers decide what they want to buy and what they want to support. I mean, some of these people, Anthony Albanese has spent 12 months working outside politics. That's it, in a fairly junior position. 12 months. Steve, who is going to scrutinise the yes and no votes? Steve, you and I can be volunteers. All we have to do is register with a party and put our name forward as scrutineers, and the governor of the state in which you live appoints you as a scrutineer. So that's who's going to scrutinise the yes and no votes, the citizens of Australia. So please, everyone, think about scrutinising the vote. It's a very simple thing. All you have to do is adjudicate whether it's a yes vote or a no vote and make sure it goes into the right piles and is counted correctly. That's all you have to do. It's very, very simple. It's not like a federal election. The federal election is not and the state elections, they're not complicated either. But this is even simpler. You just have to look at the ballot paper, is it yes or no? And you watch over. You don't even have to handle a ballot paper. You're not allowed to, in fact. But you watch over someone's shoulder as to making sure they're going in the right piles, and then they stack them correctly and count them correctly. That's all it is. So make an application to a political party, and preferably One Nation, and we will submit your name to the governor of the state. Tim Fisher, will any politicians go to jail over the scamdemic? We're working on it, mate. We are really working on it. It's very hard to hold anyone accountable in this federal government. It's so big, but we are working on it. And look, mate, a lot of people have said to me, what's it like being in Canberra? This summarises it. It's like swimming through treacle. It's very, very difficult to get anywhere. And what we found is we succeed in issues where we persist and persist and persist and persist, and we will persist. We will keep going until we hold people accountable for this, and preferably go to jail. Malcolm Turnbull, as Prime Minister, said in 2016, 2017, 16 times, there will be no Financial Services Royal Commission. The Treasurer at the time, Scott Morrison, remember him? He said 26 times there'll be no Royal Commission into the financial services sector. We got a Royal Commission. I'll tell you how we did it. Pauline Hanson did a deal over something with Malcolm Turnbull, and in exchange, she got she got approval for a Senate select inquiry into lending to primary production customers. So we got that, and then she put me as chairman. So I went and joined with Wacker Williams, who's no longer in the Senate, but he was at the time, and he and I made a video together saying it was bipartisan, no one's taking glory from this, and we publicised the Senate Select Inquiry into lending to primary production customers. We then went out into the bush, staff from Pauline's office and my office went out into the bush and encouraged farmers to make submissions, because there's a bit of work involved in making some submissions. And then when we got the submissions, we organised hearings in the bush first. Charters Towers, Roma, Perth being a centre for agriculture, not a centre for agriculture, but central to agriculture in Western Australia. And we listened to the farmers, their agony that they were going through, and the fishers that they were going through. And as a result of that, we collected all the dirt, and then we held an inquiry in Sydney with 3 of the major banks, NAB, ANZ and CBA, Commonwealth, and also with the Australian Banking Association and their Chief Executive, Anna Bligh. Then we went to Canberra, and we held another two inquiries in Canberra, one with Westpac and the other one with the insolvency practitioners, the people who come in when you foreclose, and that was horrific. And then what happened was we put down in the recommendations, in the draft recommendations, that we recommended a Royal Commission. And we had all the dirt to prove it. A couple of people in the Nationals, and I think it was George Christensen and also Senator Barry O'Sullivan, I'm guessing those two from memory, they went in there into Turnbull and said, for goodness sake, hold a Royal Commission, or else we'll be very embarrassed. Royal Commission. The government made its decision to hold a Royal Commission. We saw all the dirt that came out of that, inhuman practices, incredible. And so that's how we got the Royal Commission, just by persisting, and getting the data. And that's what we're good at, persisting. Look at Pauline. They tried to throw her in jail. She's been in politics. Well, first of all, they kicked her out of the Liberal Party in 1996. So that's 27 years she's been in politics. They kicked her, abused her, lied about her, and yet she always stands up again. So that's why I'm very proud to stand beside Senator Pauline Hanson. So Tim, to answer your questions, we persist and we use the data, and there's more data coming out. We hope to use some data next week from the UK, which shows very, very clear mirroring of the number of shots of the number of people injected with the number of injuries that have come from number of deaths. Very clear mirroring, and someone in my office is working on that right now. So we'll be releasing that next week. It's publicly available in the UK. They tried to hide it, but someone found it, and we have got it. PJS, what are your thoughts about the millions spent on The Voice when this money could have been better spent for needy? I agree with you totally. I think it's disgraceful what they're doing. We have got cost of living going through the roof. We've got a housing crisis that is now going to be worsened by around about 400,000 declared migrants coming in this year. 400,000 this year. 400,000 more beds have to be found in this country. And some of the figures we see, which we're going through, it looks like it could be 1.2 million new beds need to be found in this country. So I think The Voice is disgraceful. The Voice will achieve nothing. It'll steal from our sovereignty. It'll steal from the people. It'll entrench a disgusting white and black Aboriginal industry, which is the main cause now of the plight of Aboriginals. There is a problem with the Aboriginals, the way they're living in this country. But it is caused by governments, caused by people who don't care, and it's caused above all, maintained above all by the white and black activists, academics, consultants, lawyers, bureaucrats, politicians who are feeding off this. And if it's entrenched in the Constitution, that'll be the end of it for there'll be no accountability whatsoever. We will go. This country will be taken to the cleaners. So, plus we're spending almost $400 million on the referendum. The last one was much cheaper than that. Why can't they hold it during a federal election? This money could be far better spent with an ED. But I think something else, PJS, and that is get the government out of so much stuff. Wherever the government goes, it creates problems. And I mean that. And I'm not just talking about Labor, I'm talking about Liberals as well. Government intrudes. Every monopoly anywhere in the world is due to government. Every monopoly is due to government. And monopolies extort high prices from citizens, consumers, and taxpayers, and feed it to the predatory billionaires. That's what's going on. Hippie, same here. I refuse to be welcomed in my own country. I'm already in my own country. I wasn't born here, but my mum was, but I don't need to be welcomed to my country. Senator Nampa Price is really annoyed about the welcome to country, because she said she doesn't need to be welcome to her own country. She's the opposition spokesman for Indigenous affairs. She doesn't need it. Oh, she and Pauline, gee, they were magnificent in the Senate this week. I was sitting right behind Pauline when she let loose, and Nampa Price is next to Pauline, so she's just in front of me. And they talked about the need for accountability. Yet again, the government voted, as did David Pocock, as did the Greens, against an inquiry into the waste of billions of dollars in the form of corruption and misuse of funds that are given to the white and black Aboriginal industry. By the way, I call it white and black Aboriginal industry because it is an Aboriginal industry living off the Aboriginals, the money that is supposed to go to the Aboriginals, and it consists not just of Aboriginals, but also whiteys, activists, academics, consultants, lawyers, bureaucrats, politicians. They feed off this. That's why I call it the white and black Aboriginal industry. And Senator Nampa Price and Senator Pauline Hansard really pointed out that the government is hiding the corruption in the Aboriginal industry. And they did a really good job. And Nampa Price and Pauline also mentioned the fact that what you're doing without accountability is you're locking in misery for the Aboriginals. Because the white and black Aboriginal industry feed off this. And while ever there's no accountability or little accountability, then what happens is the corruption continues. The misery for the Aboriginals continue. You know, Senator Hanson, Pauline mentioned that the word racist is used to denigrate and shut down people. As she keeps pointing out, and she's been critical of this from the first time she entered the Parliament, the waste of money on certain sectors in our country. And she was called racist. And that's probably the most hurtful thing that you can call an Australian woman that you can call a woman. Racist. Pauline doesn't like it, but she does not give up. She doesn't let that deter her. She's wonderful to have beside me. And Pauline points out that racist term has been used to shut down dissent in this country, shut down criticism. And she says repeatedly, criticism is not racism. And that's what we've got to get away from this country. That if you criticize something, you're labeled as a racist. That's not correct. It's wrong. And it's done deliberately to shut down. I saw an example of that when a Green senator stood up and implied that Pauline had said something racist. She only mentioned one person by name, and that person was very happy to be acknowledged. And that was Senator Nampa Price. They were sitting next to each other in the Senate. And Pauline complimented Senator Nampa Price as being the only Aboriginal in Parliament who will stand up and speak out against the Aboriginal industry. So don't worry about labels. We get them all the time. Labels are the refuge of the ignorant, the incompetent, the stupid, the dishonest, and the fearful. When they don't have argument, when they don't have data, when they don't have logic, they use the label. So when people use labels with you, just say what I say. Thank you for acknowledging that I've just won the argument. Because if you had an argument, you would have given it to me, but you haven't. Instead, you give me a label. Why do they use labels? Because they haven't got an argument. Rodney, hi Senator, is it possible for Australians to open our own independent bank? We're working on that, mate, and I want to compliment the Citizens Party for their work on it. Robbie Barwick in particular, Glenn Isherwood, I've forgotten his father's name, Craig Isherwood before him, all did marvellous work on this, and they're still doing marvellous work. We're trying to work out something with the Australia Post system because it has the agencies. It just needs the training and the systems to be turned into a bank. There are other postal banks around the world that work. It is possible for Australians to open our own independent bank. But look, mate, what happened was the original Commonwealth Bank, not the Commonwealth Bank we have now, but its predecessor, the original Commonwealth Bank was also a central bank. And it was a people's bank owned by the people through the government. And it did a marvellous job. It set us up for trade, set up our export industries, infrastructure, took us through the First World War with no debt, just bonds. We emerged with no debt, the only major country to not have debt as a result of the First World War. I think that's correct. But we certainly didn't have any debt. But the biggest thing of all, the really wonderful thing of many wonderful things about the Commonwealth Bank was that it provided competition to the private banks. While ever the Commonwealth Bank was there to provide service, to provide branches, people would sign with it, and that would keep the private banks honest. And so you can see what happened. That was brought in by the Fisher Labor government in 1910 or 11, and the bank started in 1911 or 12. The big banks, the private banks, they wanted to get rid of the Commonwealth. So they started working with the Labor governments and the Liberal governments and the predecessors of the Liberal governments on the Conservative side to dismantle the bank. And bit by bit, they took authorities off the Commonwealth Bank, the People's Bank. Bit by bit, they stripped it. And then in 1995, I think around about there, Paul Keating flogged it off as a private bank. And now it's owned by the globalist predators. You know, I can't remember the quote, but what's the name of the famous author? Banjo Paterson. Banjo Paterson wrote about these predator banks in the 19th century, 1880s, 1890s. Wrote a wonderful little piece about it. I'll see if I can find it one day and get it to you. But he saw these people and wrote about it. Banjo Paterson wasn't just a dreamy poet. He wasn't just the author of the Waltzing Matilda. He was an economist and a lawyer, and bloody good at that. And so he was very well written, very well spoken, and he talked about the globalist predators back then. I'm not the first to use the term globalist predators by a long shot. He didn't use that term exactly, but that's what he wrote about. And by the way, One Nation supports the formation of a public bank again. We have been very strong, both Pauline and I. I mentioned it again only yesterday in a speech. Kerry says, is there a way out from under these big companies? Yes, there is. I haven't really thought about it much so far, but that is to buy local. It's also to buy products from companies that don't have these in their share registry. I think Coles has them in their registry. I haven't checked Woolies, but I'm guessing they would have too. So they own both sides of everything. So of many things, rather. I shouldn't say everything. So we'll be talking more about the ownership of big companies in Australia. So that's the way to get out of it. To buy local, and to buy from companies in which these big funds, investment funds, do not have shares. And the figures I'm about to quote you are from Jim Killaley, who was Deputy Commissioner for Taxation for international matters, and large companies for many years. He mentioned this first in 1996, I think, and then again in 2010. He said 90% of Australia's large companies are foreign-owned, and since 1953 have paid little or no company tax. The equivalent figure in Japan is 2.5%. Equivalent figure in America and in Britain is about 12.5%. 90% here. Why? Because the government has made it easy for them. The government gives the large multinationals easy run in this country. The 1953 double taxation law, I can't remember the exact name of the bill, made it possible for foreign-owned companies to not pay company tax. 1980s, Bob Hawke, as the Labor Prime Minister, changed the petroleum rent resources tax to ensure that no companies would pay much at all in the way of petroleum tax. None. And Chevron, the world's largest tax avoider, took advantage of that and still takes advantage of it today with our Northwest Shelf gas. So we export our resources in the form of gas from the Northwest Shelf, and it goes to Japan, for example. We're the largest exporters of liquid natural gas in the world. When the Japanese import it, they charge $3 billion in import duty. So they make more money out of our gas than we do, by a long way. We make in the way of hundreds of millions of dollars. And the other way is to start voting for smaller parties. Because what happens is we've been raising this, Pauline in particular, since 1996, and she and I since 2016, again, together, have been raising this need to tax foreign multinationals. We've come up with a long-term strategy and a short-term strategy, an immediate strategy that we can do. And every now and then when we get our policies some traction in the public domain, Labor or Liberal, whoever's in government, comes up and says, we're going to tax multinationals. Everyone goes back to sleep and forgets about it. All they do is adjust a little bit of money from Apple or Google, and they think that's it. Rubbish. There is so much more in the way of taxation of foreign multinationals. So who pays for that multinational share of tax? Mums and dads in this country. Troy, he asks, can you talk to William Bay, the cancelled doctor that took the referendum to High Court? He exposed the referendum being illegal to the Constitution. Well, when we heard about, we listened to our constituents, and when we get our emails and our telephone calls, we've heard a lot about this. It first broke yesterday. So a barrister in my office and I called William. We had a good exchange, and we'll be calling the Australian Electoral Commission next. But we've already had a talk. And he acknowledged that it is not a victory. First of all, Troy, he did not take the referendum to the High Court. He submitted an application to take it to the High Court, but it has not been entered into the High Court. It has not even been considered because it has not even been filed as accepted by the High Court. It's not even filed with the High Court. So it's not entered the High Court. It's not considered by the High Court. It's not a victory. There's been no decision. It's not even on the books for the High Court. So he did not expose the referendum being illegal to the Constitution. Not at all. He's got some good questions, and we're trying to actually call the Australian Electoral Commission now, or the minister in charge of the Australian Electoral Commission. But there is this booklet here, the referendum booklet. So this is the case for the no case and the yes case, and that's what we're trying to clarify now. But William Bay did not get into the High Court, did not even get into the High Court. It is wrong to call it a victory. No decision. Hope that's clarified it, Troy. John says, I got welcomed to country the day I was born. I don't recall it, but it allegedly included a smack. Oh, that's for all the sins that your forefathers made, mate. That's why you got smacked, because you're guilty because of your forefathers' sins. Presumably they sinned. So no, and no from me. Good on you, Sal. No from me too. Anyone who wants to look after our country, protect the sovereignty of our country, will be voting no. I might have a session on the Voice one Friday. You know, I'll tell you a story while we're waiting for the next question. Senator Jacinta Price, organised 20 elders and leaders from Aboriginal communities, remote communities, to come down to Canberra, all Aboriginal, and they were brought down because they voted no. Not one Labor Party MP, not the Prime Minister, not Linda Burney, not one Labor Party MP came and talked to them. Not one. Not interested in listening. That's what we need. We don't need a voice. We need bloody ears. Not one Green visited them. They're all upstairs in the central building in Parliament House. And a few Nationals did, a few Liberals did, Pauline and I did, Senator Babette did. So I walked over to one of them. His name was Eddie, and he was from the Northern Territory, I think. Yeah, Northern Territory, remote part of the Northern Territory. And I said to him just straight up, mate, why are you voting no? And he said, because I'm Australian and because it's racist. That's it. Plain and simple. But Australia is also the only country in the world, to my knowledge, in which the citizens have voted on the Constitution before it came in. They voted on the Constitution. The only country. So it's a citizens' constitution. It's a people's constitution. If we vote for the voice, the details have to come from politicians in Canberra, loyal to the United Nations, and it will be a politician's constitution from then on. We have got a people's constitution, and I want to keep it that way. Politicians are doing too much already to wreck this country. Don't give them a chance by wrecking our governing document, our supreme governing document. I think that's time. So I've got to get on to the next thing. So thank you very much for listening in. We'll be back next Friday at 3 o'clock.